Welcome to Penn Jen's Inkwell podcast. My name is Jen Waters. I hope you enjoy my stories. In case you ever dreamed of living in a shoe, now is your chance. Shoes is inspired by the Mother Goose nursery rhyme, "There was an old woman who lived in a shoe." The most common version of the rhyme is, "There was an old woman who lived in a shoe. She had so many children, she didn't know what to do. She gave them some broth without any bread, then whipped them all soundly and put them to bed." Since the last line of that rhyme didn't go over well, there are various other more positive versions with a different ending. Marjorie Ainsworth Decker published a version in the Christian Mother Goose book in 1978. It went something like this. "There was an old woman who lived in a shoe. She had so many children and loved them all too. She said, 'Thank you, Lord Jesus, for sending them bread,' then kissed them all gladly and sent them to bed." The grandmother in the first rhyme that I just read, she sounds a little abusive. The grandmother in the second rhyme that I just read is more like the grandma in my story Shoes, and she happens to live in an ankle boot. I just thought that a neighborhood of shoes, where each shoe was a home, would make such a lovely animated film, almost like Hobbit houses. One of my favorite parts of The Lord of the Rings were the cute hobbit homes. Then each of the characters could have a shoe that fits his or her personality. When I was younger, I used to play dress up and try on my mom's shoes, especially her high heels. Today, high heels give me back pain. For instance, I might like to live in pink Nike sneakers or black flats or tan Birkenstocks. I'm not sure how you could live in a Birkenstock, but it might be possible. I tried to remember my favorite shoes over the years, and the ones that stand out as the most memorable were the brown lace-up snow boots that I wore for 4 years at Syracuse University. Since it snowed from October until May, they were the only shoes to wear all year. I trashed them badly in the snow, but they had a lot of character. On the contrary, sometimes flip-flops are the only way to go in Los Angeles. DSW, Macy's, and Nordstrom's are great places to walk through and brainstorm shoe selections. So pick your favorite shoe and make it your new home. Shoes is scored to the walking theme by Eric Baines. Now please enjoy Shoes. There was an old woman who lived in an ankle boot with a neighborhood of footwear. "Grandmother's house," her grandchildren called it, climbing its laces and sliding to the sole. Although her 5 children, the parents of her grandchildren, lived nearby, her grandchildren enjoyed staying at her home more than any other place in the entire countryside, including the village candy store. Of course, she was a good grandma. She fed her grandchildren, clothed them, scolded them, and encouraged them when they were sad. They never lacked for anything because she was so wise and creative. Gramps had passed away a few years ago, but she kept his shoes by the fireplace for everyone to remember. The Shoes neighborhood, which was over the river and through the woods, practically consisted of a shoe store. It had an army boot, a ballet slipper, a bowling shoe, a climbing shoe, a cowboy boot, a brogue, a cleat, a clog, a derby, a flat, a galoche, a golf shoe, a gum shoe, an ice skate, a knee boot, a leader booty, a loafer, a Mary Jane, a moccasin, a monk, a mule, an Oxford, a platform, a pump, a roller skate, a rubber boot, a sandal, a bedroom slipper, a sneaker, a snow boot, a stiletto, a thigh-high boot, and a wedge. Much like the shoe section at the village clothing store, there was a type of shoe for everyone's personal taste. Except in the Shoes neighborhood, the customers lived in their shoe instead of putting them on their feet. "Shine up your shoes," the neighborhood caretaker called, reviewing the homes during monthly inspection, especially during the holidays. Grammy, as her grandchildren called her, liked to light up her shoe. "String lights," from the rooftop," she called as the children dangled the glowing bulbs from the shoe top. As much as everyone liked the shoe's neighborhood for its cleverness and class, it had one enemy. Its long-standing rival was the 3-footed giant, whose feet never fit in shoes, because shoes come in a pair, and he had larger-than-life triple feet. So not only was the size a problem, but also his number of feet. Bam, bam, bam! The whole ground shook every time he came near the shoe's neighborhood.
"You think you're so special because you have shoes,"
he bellowed.
"Shoes, shoes, shoes."
"Oh, not him again," Grammy sighed, running to her shoelace window. She finished her morning cup of tea and buttered crumpets and put a lid on her bubbling lunchtime vegetable soup. "Hide the food, children!" The children gathered Grammy's apple pies, slid them under the beds, and slipped them in the sock drawers. "Maybe if we got the giant his own shoes, he'd stop bullying us," one of her 12 grandchildren suggested. "Who knows if that would even work?" Another one of her grandchildren cried in fear, hiding the cookie jar. "I'm willing to start sewing the shoes," the oldest grandchild yelped. Anything to end his tantrums. As the 3-footed giant plodded his way through the streets, the thigh-high boot home fell over, the roller skate home lost a wheel, and the stiletto home broke its heel. Several porch sandal straps fell to the ground from a local residence, swinging back and forth with no place to attach. It was not a pretty sight, and neighbors ran from their homes in tears and fright, afraid that their shoe house would be next to fall apart. "Quick! Run and measure his footprints," Grammy called to her grandchildren as the giant stomped. "How big do you think his feet are?" the 12 children pondered, using a tape measure for the task. 10 feet long by 5 feet wide is what it looks like," the tiniest grandchild announced, comparing his own small feet. "He's destroying our stylish homes," a middle grandchild declared. "How fast can we finish his shoes?" "A week?" one of the twin grandchildren asked. "No, more like a day or two," her twin argued in response. "Well, he seems to have wandered off for now," Grammy concluded, standing on top of her ankle boot home, peering into the distance over the shoe's neighborhood. "Let's get to work before he comes back." As the 12 grandchildren worked for 5 straight nights in a row, they made the 3-footed giant individual army boots, matching his 3 distinct footprints, each of which had varying number of toes. When the army boots were painted and laced, Grammy inspected the shoes with her spectacles. "Looks good to me, dear ones," she reassured, hugging them for their efforts. "Now, if he'd only wear them." She paced about the boots, gearing up for her showdown with the giant, anticipating the next time he came round. "We're putting these shoes on his feet. If we have to tie him to the ground to do it," she declared. Days later, when the 3-footed giant came back to the shoe's neighborhood, Grammy had been baking.
"Those blueberry muffins smell so good,"
the giant drooled, sticking his nose into her shoelace window. "Oh, dearie," Grammy whispered. "So good to see you. I have a gift for you. Your own trio of shoes."
"Shoes?"
he roared.
"Shoes never fit on my feet, so I look like a bumbling, clumsy fool. I get sores on my ugly toes, and everyone makes fun of me. Why are you telling me that I could even have shoes? You're mean."
"Now, son, you listen to me," Grammy proclaimed, coming from the front door of her ankle boot home. You put these shoes on, and you start feeling sorry for yourself. She pointed the trees in her yard and showed him his new trio of army boots. These shoes are as good as anybody's shoes, and they're the perfect fit. The three-footed giant paused for a moment and inspected the triad of boots, grunting and growling. Grammy's grandchildren stayed hidden deep in their closets with the blueberry muffins, praying he would take the triplet army boots and leave before he decided to eat any more than the grandmother's sweets. Put me down, Grammy insisted. As the giant swiped her up into his gigantic hand, she pinched him hard.
Ah!
The giant yelled.
I just needed your help in putting on the boots. I've never done it before.
I can give you pointers from the ground, she scolded, slipping down his side. Behave yourself, young man. Then he slammed his foot on the ground. The whole neighborhood rattled, rumbled, and cracked.
Fine. I'm trying to get my feet into your boots,
he moaned.
They look like shoes for a military general.
Yes, son. I'm sure you'd make a good military general if you could get a better attitude, she chided. After much fussing, fidgeting, and rolling on the ground, the three-footed giant shoved his feet into the boots. Then he broke down sobbing like a 2-year-old child. Each of his tears fell like huge raindrops. Now that you have those shoes, you can walk wherever you want in peace, Grammy explained, nodding. Against her will, the giant scooped Grammy up again in his palm and placed her at his heart. I told you to keep me on the ground, Grammy pointed out, poking his shoulder with her eyeglasses.
I can't leave you on the ground.
The giant blubbered in tears.
I love you too much.
Why, son, I love you too, Grammy exclaimed as her grandchildren came running from hiding.
I have a few friends who could also use their own shoes,
the giant suggested.
Their feet never fit in regular shoes, and it causes so many hurt feelings. If I could bring them by, could you make shoes for them too?
Grammy had a calm moment, considering any alternative other than yes, and realized she must agree. My grandchildren and I will make shoes for anyone who needs them, Grammy proposed, rolling out her measuring tape from her pocket. It fell from her hand and wrapped around his arm and wrist. From then on, the Shoes neighborhood was known as the most generous place for people with misshapen feet. If their feet didn't fit in anywhere else, they would always be able to find the perfect shoes with Grammy, who had more children of every size and shape than she could fit in her ankle boot home. This has been Pen Gen's Inkwell podcast. I wrote and performed all the original stories in the podcast. This podcast is produced by Eric Baines, who scored all the stories and poems in the series to original and public domain music. The podcast is associated with my blog of the same name, Pen Gen's Inkwell, which can be found on my website, jenwaters.com.